Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9. It says, honor God with everything you own. Give him the first and the best. A couple words here I want you to circle. Circle the word everything, circle the word first, and circle the word best. Now look up here when you're done circling all that. Because I got in trouble a couple weeks ago saying, look up here too soon, and somebody, I'm not done circling. So when you're done, just look up. I've heard it all, believe me. So I'm trying to practice how I've been challenged, just like you try to practice, okay? Is he talking about just money here? No. Not at all. He says, honor God with everything you own. That means your time, your talent, your treasure, everything, no matter what it is. And he says, no matter what it is that you have, no matter what it is that God has blessed you with, give him the first and give him the best of what you have. And if you want God to give you the best in your life, and who wouldn't? Amen? I mean, I just want God's worst. Really? You want God's best, amen? We all do. If you want God's best, then the answer is that you have to give your best to God. Now, the Bible tells us a story. It's not in your notes, but you might want to write this reference down. 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 7 through 16. It tells us a story about Elijah, the prophet, and how that he went to a widow's house to visit with her. Now, in the land at that time, there was a great famine going through the land. And people didn't have a lot to eat because there was a famine, there was drought, they couldn't grow the crops, they couldn't grow the corn, they couldn't grow the wheat, they couldn't do anything like that. And so there was a great famine. People didn't have enough to eat. And Elijah came to this widow's house and asked her to bake him some bread, feed him some bread. And the widow told him, she said, Elijah, I'd love to do that, but I don't have hardly anything left. We're in the middle of a famine. We're in the middle of a drought. All I have is just a tiny little bit of flour and a tiny little bit of oil. And I was planning to use that to make a meal for myself and my son, and then we were going to die. And Elijah says, I want you to make me some bread. Go back to your house, make me some bread. That was hard to understand, but in faith, she went back and she made Elijah some bread. And Elijah said, if you'll obey me, if you'll follow me in faith, if you'll do what I tell you to do, you'll have flour and oil every day throughout the entire famine. Maybe nobody else would, but because she had daring faith, because she was willing to step out and listen and obey what the prophet Elijah told her to do, she went back home, she baked some bread, and I want to illustrate how that happened. I've got a box here with just the words, my life. And it could be your life. I just put my life. And I want you to see how that Elijah took what this woman gave. She gave all she had. She gave the very best. That's all she had left. And Elijah said, every day you'll have flour, you'll have oil. And so every day she would go in and she would have flour and she would have oil. And I'm sure at the end of that first day, she was probably thinking after she made the bread for Elijah and she gave it to him, she might have been thinking, wow, I wonder if what he said is true, that I would really have all this flour and all this oil every single day. And maybe she went over, and she tapped the box, and she said, I wonder if there's anything in there. Just like you and I would, we would test it to see. But the next morning she woke up, and guess what happened? There was more flour, and there was more oil. And she was able to do her bread for that day. And maybe by that night, she was still thinking about what the promise was from Elijah. And so she went over and she started thinking, is that really true? Is that going to happen? And that's probably what we would do. We would have doubts. We would wonder, is God's promise real? Is he really saying that he would give me this? If I would just give him what I have, give him my best, he would do this for me? And sure enough, the next morning, she woke up and there was more flour and there was more oil to make more bread. And all through the days of the famine, every single day there was more flour and there was more oil. And maybe, somewhere along the way, just like we would, maybe somebody would probably start to wonder and start to think, well, is there really any flour, any oil left? And we'd want to check it out, But God was true and God's promise was real. And God said, you know what? You'll have plenty of flour for every single day, no matter what, because I promised. And if you just have daring faith and give me your best, I will give you my best. That's what happened.